Welcome to the lecture part of the Book of Book throughout the ages. And I am glad that you had already opportunity to look at the manuscripts, and we have an ambitious plans to expand and acquire more manuscripts, and I hope this maybe at some point become a Bible museum at the West Coast. So this is why it's a beginning, and we decided to do it as a lectorium, and today's lecture is how ancient is the Bible, the Bible text which we are reading today. In other words, you open your Bible, when was it actually written? I mean, yeah, it could be written, okay, the book of Isaiah, the vision of Isaiah, which he saw during the reign of these kings and so forth, is it really true? Or maybe it's a forgery. How would we know? How can we be absolutely, positively sure about this? Well, for many centuries, Christianity did not doubt the biblical text. However, the age of enlightenment in 18th century, 19th century sowed lots of doubt in the minds of people, which basically made the entire European continent into atheistic countries. And Marxism emerged, and all other atheistic philosophies, all of which begin to validate themselves with the doubt about the biblical text. They sow the doubt. You know, this is how uneducated, uncivilized Christians believe this is what the science says. Did they have a basis for their arguments? The answer is yes. I'm showing you a photograph of the page from the codex. There were several of them. They're called Erfurt codices. By the way, you probably saw that there are scrolls and there are codices. Scroll contains the leaves that are stitched together, sewn together in line, where codex is a bound book. So codex appears to be used about 3rd century AD. So Erfurt codices, there are 3 of them. They are the manuscripts that contain most of the Old Testament Hebrew Bible, but they are dated, as you can see, 1200. 1200. There is a reason why we have the date like this and why we don't have ancient biblical manuscripts, more antique, why we don't have the manuscripts from the 6th century, from the 1st century. If you want to know why, you will come tomorrow. Tomorrow we'll talk about that. But today, what I want to show you is this interesting train of development. So this type of manuscripts were used in the first printed Hebrew Bible, known as the Great Rabbinic Bible, or Mikraot Gdalot. You saw in our collection the 2 volumes, dated by 1618. The original was printed in Venice in 1524. And in our subsequent lectures, you will hear a wonderful story how significant this Bible was for Christian Reformation. But in reality, what we have is this. You have this type of Hebrew text, 13. There were some manuscripts, 14th centuries. All of these manuscript is something written by hand, right? Because remember, the printing press was invented by Johannes Gutenberg in 1453, I believe. So the Rabbinic Bible was printed 70 years later. So this text was based on the manuscripts no earlier than the 12th century. And from this text, we have a traditional Protestant Bibles. You have the first translation, Luther Bible, 1535, then 1611, King James Bible, and not only those, but you have Spanish Bible, Reina Valera, you have French Bible. So all these old Bibles that are difficult now to read, they were all based on, their text was based on the text of the Great Rabbinic Bible. Well, an interesting development was in the early 1800s. The discovery of what is now known as Leningrad Codex. You saw this on our display. And tomorrow we'll talk great deal more about this Bible. It's a complete Old Testament, Hebrew Old Testament, the way you are reading it today in your English Bibles or any other Bibles. And it was discovered by a Karaite. Karaite was a sect in Judaism. They split off the Judaism in about 9th century, 10th century. And they really had their Bibles. They did not do with their Bibles what the rabbinic synagogues did. Tomorrow I'll tell you what the rabbinic synagogues did. I'm not going to tell you the secret. But the Karaites didn't do that. So there was this fellow, Abraham Firkovich. He was a Karaite. He lived in Crimea. It used to be Ottoman Empire. It became Russia at this time. And he was a collector. In 1824, he presented his collection to Russian Emperor Alexander I, who was a good believing Christian, and he actually was the first who opened the Bible Society in Russia. So emperor acquired this Hebrew Bible and a number of other manuscripts for Russian Empire, and it's now preserved in the collection of St. Petersburg National Library. From this Bible, from this manuscript, this is the manuscript, handwriting. In 1935, in Germany, was created a printed edition of the Bible known as Biblia Hebraica. And then it had several editions. Now they have what you saw on display, a printed edition, between two manuscripts. There was a printed edition. And this is basically the fourth edition, which is complete. They're now working on a fifth edition, but the text is going to be the same. It's just some layouts and critical apparatus, which is, we'll talk a little bit about it, what it is. But from this Bible, Biblia Hebraica, all modern English, German, French Bibles are translated. So, New American Standard, New International, New Revised Standard, all other, there's more than 60 translations of the Bible into English. All of them are from the Biblia Hebraica text. Okay? So, let's summarize what we're having here. 1300 AD. Okay. It's about 800 years old. 1008 AD. Well, it's a little better. 1000 years old. Versus 1400 to 400 BC, which is basically the years of the completion of the Hebrew Bible. That's too far apart. Right? Still, can we really trust that what is found in that book is not a forgery? Can we really trust that it was real Isaiah who lived in the 7th, 8th century BC, whose words we are reading? Not some kind of sophisticated forger who did this? Well, the 1902 changed a little bit. In Egypt, a British scholar, John Nash, found this interesting papyrus. Papyrus is made of the reed, which grows in the Nile. So it's very obvious that papyri do not survive very well. The Codex Leningradices, as other codexes, they're written on parchment. Parchment is a vellum, which is the skin of the sheep. So it's a miracle that this survived. 175 BC. It contains 10 commandments. Nice. Plus a famous for the Jews prayer, Shema. Deuteronomy 6:4. Hear, Israel, the Lord is our God, the Lord is one. That's all. But It is indeed an ancient biblical text. So, too little, unfortunately. Not sufficient. Well, this fellow, Muhammad Adib, the Bedouin, his name became famous. He himself did not realize what in the world he had done. He was hiking around here. No, just kidding. He was hiking, going with his flock home to his tents. And yes, sheep and goats, and suddenly the goat disappeared. One can't find. Where did she go? It almost sounds like a parable of a lost sheep, right? But the story has a little different ending. He was trying to look for this goat, and he suspected that it could have fallen through that hole in this rock, sedimentary rock formation. And so he threw the stone in, expecting to hear meh. But instead he heard ding. Ooh, that may be more precious than a goat. Forget about the goat. I think there might be something. In the desert, Bedouins often were very lucky. I mean, these guys know desert in and out. And if somebody 300, 400, 500, 800 years ago hid the treasure chest, if somebody comes, some Indiana Jones thinks he'll find this, good luck. Bedouins found it all. It was a miracle that they were able to find the pyramid of King Tutankhamun. Most of the pyramids, Bedouins got to them before any archaeologist. And that's why many Bedouins, you see them, they're living in shacks. Not really, they're rich people. I don't know, but they're rich. Anyway, so this Muhammad thought that's his lucky day. There might be some coins in there. Golden coins, ooh. So he crawls in, gets into the inner sinkhole of the cave, and sees vessels. We have copies of these clay vessels downstairs. And they were stacked like this. 7 of them. But when he opens this, he finds something like this. That's a big disappointment. Some kind of leather rolled in, old and shrunk. No luck today. So they took a couple of these rolls of leather, thinking that at least they could make some sandals out of it. Then his cousin looked and looked and looked, and he found the fainted letters on there, some writing. Okay, maybe we are still lucky, not maybe that big, but let's run to Bethlehem, to the antique shop, and sell it to the antique dealer. Well, antique dealer looked at this, paid them, I don't remember how much he paid, maybe $100 or so. But when he looked at the letters, and he was a member of a Syrian Orthodox church, he decided to show it to his priest. This is how the 7 scrolls found in cave, which I showed you, which is now known as cave number 1, ended up in St. Mark Monastery, old city of Jerusalem. And it was known the Orthodox priest had a friend. The friend's name was Ephraim Sukenik. He was a professor of archaeology in Hebrew University. When Sukenik looked at the text, he was astounded. As a paleographist, he was able, paleography is the science that studies the handwriting. As a paleographist, he was able to compare this text with the Nash papyrus and determine that this is the same age. He read this and realized that he was reading the text of the book of the prophet Isaiah. Besides the book of the prophet Isaiah, in this text, in these scrolls, he found other interesting documents. Basically, reading the non-biblical materials, Sukenik discovered that the place where they came from, known in Arabic as Khirbet Qumran, was the place, was indeed populated by the people of the Essene sect. Nobody knew about Essenes before. And nothing, absolutely. Because the only mention of Essenes are found in the works of Josephus, who calls them he really talks about them as a weird people, and Plinius, the Roman historian. But to really prove that Essenes existed was not possible until this accidental discovery. So the archaeologists marched in to the area. And the more they surveyed, the more they discovered. The book of Isaiah, as well as the book of Psalms, as well as the book of Deuteronomy, were probably the best biblical fragments that were found intact. In fact, if you looked at our wall, we saw a reproduction you could see the reproduction of the fragment from the book of Deuteronomy. However, there are many more interesting and exciting pieces of the biblical text. I'm just showing you the book of Genesis. But it is now, all the Qumran scrolls now are completely digitized. What you see is the book of Isaiah. You can scroll. See? What you saw downstairs, you can scroll it digitally. You can enlarge the text. See? You can read it up close and personal. And it's actually telling you what's there. You see? So that's the state of the science today. Even these mere facts clearly demonstrate that we're dealing with a real ancient text. This text is dated back to 2nd century BC, which is 1,200 years older than the oldest biblical manuscript of the Hebrew Old Testament, which people knew for years. And if you take, for example, the book of the prophet Isaiah, which is 7th, 8th century, and then you take to the Isaiah scroll, only 400, 500 years difference. Not a 1,700 years difference. And when you compare what is written in this text and what is written in the Hebrew Bible from which our Bibles are translated, the text is identical. Well, I mean, let's be realistic. If you're dealing with the publishing business, any respected specialist in a book publishing will tell you that in the best of the best, HarperCollins House, Random House, whatever we have publishing houses, the book is printed, you can find typos. So, it is not typos here because this is handwriting. But you have spelling differences. Scholars study the patterns of spelling differences to determine some other phenomena. That science is called textual criticism. Scientific study of the biblical text with the purpose to recover, reconstruct the additional text. So yes, there are spelling differences which are explained in different ways, but the book says the same thing. If I read to you Isaiah 24, verse 17 here, and I read Isaiah 24, verse 17 in Codex Leningrad or in Codex Erfurt, it's going to sound the same. That's the bottom line. The text is much older than we knew about. That's the essence of the discoveries in Judean desert. And actually, there are much more than Isaiah. Many more texts. Look at this. 913 manuscripts were found in Qumran altogether. 11 caves, sorry. So 11 caves reveal 913 manuscripts. Some of them are, like Isaiah, intact. Some of them are a little bit fragmented. For example, this one. You see fragments. For example, you have fragments of the book of Genesis. You know why it says Genesis dash Exodus? It means that these are fragments of the Torah scroll which you saw downstairs. So, as you saw in the Torah, there is no chapter divisions, verse divisions, nothing. It's just a straightforward text. You need to read it and identify where are you actually reading it from. And so this means that the text contains the last verses of the book of Genesis and the first verses of the book of Exodus. And so there is many. You can basically keep going. And actually this is only Genesis. See, you got Genesis. You keep scrolling. Oh, you can have here, look. This is beautiful. Some of these fragments contain the ancient Hebrew script known as Paleo-Hebrew. See? But you can see how much work it has been done. The work, do you see what is happening here? They basically, they had to develop, they had to apply all kinds of knowledge in chemistry, in photo technique. See, this is how they've done it. It means that when they found the scroll, it was so tight, packed, and shrunk because of the, through drying, that it takes a serious technique to actually be able to open it up and see what it is. And then they put it on the plate, attach it, and that's how this fragment is preserved. Today it's in Rockefeller Center in Jerusalem, not in New York. So, and thanks God to the photo technique. I mean, I don't need this manuscript. I don't need to actually come and eyeball them in the museum. 50 years to get to that stage. 50 years. Every single document is published here. As you can see, it's not only 11 caves of Qumran, you have some scrolls in Masada, you have some other. So that's why the whole collections is called the manuscripts or the fragments of Judean desert. They're all scattered. And out of them, you have 223 biblical texts that present demonstrative evidences of the antiquity of the biblical text which we are reading today. I want you to think for a moment about what is actually happening in history. You see, first, you have a development of atheism and Marxism throughout the 19th century, which almost eliminates in people. It literally, in Europe, Christianity as a faith was almost completely eliminated. The impact on Christianity in North America is extremely serious, and it is felt today. Because all these doubts in the antiquity of the biblical texts lead to some serious rise of alternative philosophies, such as Marxism, Darwinism, the dialectical materialism, all of these philosophies, they basically prey on the vulnerabilities of the faith community, Judeo-Christian faith community, to defend their position. Well, but God has an interesting plan. Step by step, the ancient biblical texts are being revealed. They're being revealed at the right moment. I don't know what would have happened if these Bedouins discovered something 20 years before, 30 years before, during the World War I. But the moment was right. One of the first institutions of the State of Israel was Hebrew University. Hebrew University provided scholarly expertise sufficient to deal with the challenges of discovering, preserving, and reading these materials. Somebody can say, oh, that's a coincidence. But maybe it is not. Maybe God was behind this. What do you think? I believe so. I believe, as a physicist from the beginning, these discoveries convinced me to look at the Bible, not as the book of some kind of legends, but as the book which contains the true revelation from God. So I hope knowing this will help you to reconsider your understanding of the Bible. So with this, I would like to invite you for our lecture tomorrow, which is called, How Can We Trust the Text of the Bible? Tomorrow we'll answer why we don't have the ancient manuscript in the Jewish community. And basically try to grapple with the issue, how can we believe that the Hebrew Bible was not actually distorted by some Jewish community or whatever? So if you want to know the answers, come tomorrow.